And I think I'll start with Brigitte Wöringen. Hello.
Hello.
Why I'd like to start with you is because you are a representative of the German government. You're the only representative of the German government here. And I think that it would be good for all of us to benefit from what you might have to say. Specifically about, to start, the question of electric vehicle adoption in Germany. We have our own situation here in the States, and I'm sure any number of us can talk about that, but the German situation is not as familiar to us. So perhaps you could tell us about the policy initiatives in Germany that are most specifically oriented toward adoption of EVs.
So first, Jolo, I introduce myself.
Please do.
Because I'm not.
And actually, forgive me, let's take an opportunity for everybody to do that. Yeah. Please go first.
So, as you can see, I am Deputy Director General and Head of Directorate Sustainable Mobility, Energy and Logistics. And the name of my directorate is Program. We focus on sustainable, climate-friendly mobility in our work, but I want to say that we are not the Ministry of Environment. We are the Ministry of Transport and Mobility. So we tackle the challenge that we have the climate challenges and the pollution on the one hand, but we want to enable mobility for persons and goods on the other hand, or we want to bring those two challenges together.
Okay.
So, and we see in the electric mobility and in pushing electric mobility a key moment to bring those challenges together, to have a climate-friendly mobility with accent on both parts of the expression.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? We'll see who.
I'll go. So Stephen gave me a promotion a little while ago. I'm business development with Bosch EV Solutions with a focus on electric vehicle charging stations. I've been in the automotive industry with the same organization for over 40 years. I've seen many of these changes in technology over those years. But this is probably the most exciting change that I've been exposed to. We have a small group that works on charging stations and supplies them to many of the auto companies. In fact, we've worked with all the manufacturers here and many more in supporting them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Matthias Erb. I'm a Chief Engineering Officer of Volkswagen North American region. And first of all, thank you that I can join this discussion today. As an engineer, I'm really happy and that I'm still young enough to be in the middle of this discussion, in the middle of this development of battery electric vehicles or electrification in total. Because in our opinion, and this is Volkswagen in total, we think this is the biggest change we have in the automotive industry in decades, and maybe that the next perhaps 10 years will be more exciting than the past 100 or more than 100 years in this industry. And in my opinion, it's not only the vehicles, not only the cars we see here, it's also the environment, it's also the digitalization of the environment. And so we are really looking forward for that future, and maybe later in the discussion we can elaborate a little bit more how our group is like catching up and how we see our role in the future in this change of the industry. Because what we've just heard in the keynote, I think, is totally right. Always, if you're kind of witnessing a disruption in an industry, you will see new players. Mm-hmm. And the current players, and basically we have the traditional players here on stage, the current players have really to be very agile and very ambitious to catch up with this development. So I'm really looking forward for this discussion.
Thank you, Matthias.
So I'll carry on. My name is Roberto Rossetti. I'm the VP of Engineering at BMW of North America. Yes, I'm based here in the US. in New Jersey, Woodcliff Lake, at our US headquarters. So it's an honor and a privilege really to be here and to talk about BMW's electrification strategy. And let me say a few words on the company and where we stand in terms of electromobility. Electromobility is the top priority for BMW. It was really the natural step to take after our strategy on efficient dynamics, which we started in as early as 2007, where we put really sustainability at the core of our company. And after that strategy, this early strategy meant that we made internal combustion engines more efficient, our powertrains more efficient, and also the entire vehicle more efficient. But it also meant, and that's more important, really it led to the launch of electric vehicles on a large scale. And so after our first electric vehicles that we built back in 1972, and also after one of the largest wide-scale electric vehicle field tests in the automotive industry, where we used electric Minis, and also in the second wave where we used electric BMWs, we launched our first battery electric vehicle, the i3, in 2013, and we were one of the first OEMs to do so. And the i3 was then followed also by the spectacular i8, and both cars are on display here today in this room. So today we are offering 7 electric models in the US. So we will also launch an additional 25 electric vehicles until 2025. So last year we sold 100,000 electric vehicles worldwide, and more than 20% here in the US, and we plan to sell 140,000 electric vehicles this year alone. So we are very, let's say, on the road to the electrification. We're fully committed to the electrification of our vehicles, and it's true to say that already today we are very much also an electromobility brand.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Craven. I'm responsible for regulation out of the Washington, D.C. office. And as the ambassador had mentioned, it wasn't Henry Ford, but it was Daimler. It was our company that started this whole industry. And it is very interesting to see how this industry is evolving very quickly. And I'm a firm believer that government has a very strong role to play to make sure this industry evolves in the proper directions. Keynote speaker Robert mentioned, I agree with most of what he said. We can argue about when autonomous vehicles will actually happen. Some say it's years. He said it was 15 years from now. But we all agree it will reduce costs. And if we don't manage autonomous vehicles, in fact, I say if we should incentivize, government needs to incentivize autonomous vehicles to be zero emission. And I want to mention not just electric vehicles, but fuel cell vehicles need to be a part of this conversation also, that we have invested that the government policy needs to be involved. Otherwise, we could be in a position where vehicles emit more emissions than we want. We can go further into discussion later on that point.
Thank you. Editorially speaking, I'd like to point out that it's not a surprise that you don't agree completely with someone from BMW. That
we don't at all.
We don't expect to make that kind of news here today. So, in any event, Deputy Director of Voting, let's go back to the German policy circle, and I'd like to get us there by talking about what we see in the United States, the obstacles specifically to electric vehicle uptake. We have issues about the cost of the vehicles. They're very expensive. The batteries don't last long enough. They don't hold enough energy. And then there's sort of a related problem, I would suggest, a third one having to do with the how much time it takes to recharge a battery. So have you made any progress with those problems in Germany in terms of policy?
Yes, we also know in Germany those problems. We see that people don't buy so much electric cars because they are afraid that they will stop on the street because the battery has not that range. And but firstly, the car is very expensive. And for that, we established a buyer's premium, and also we give tax incentives, and from up to the moment of the buyer's premium, we see that people buy more cars. And the other thing, the range of the battery. We have a program and very ambitious plans to reach a nationwide coverage with charging points. And up until 2020, we plan to install 36,000 normal charging points, which it needs time to charge the battery, but you perhaps can drink a coffee or go shopping and so on. But as well, we want to establish 7,000 fast charging points until 2020, mostly on the German autobahns. We don't begin from zero to 2020. We have already not too bad charging situation, and we remark that the more we optimize this situation, the more people seriously are reflecting or realizing a buy of an electric vehicle.
I think Mr. Atkinson made a very interesting point in his talk when he said that there is a possibility that internal combustion vehicles would have some sort of protection, political protection, that would make it more challenging for the electric vehicle industry to grow. Is this a problem in Germany, where internal combustion is and the car business is such a major part of the economy?
Yes, indeed. Out of good reason, Germany is very proud of the traditional engines, and it's really they are really good, and it's hard to work against. I will say against, but it's hard to establish another level, and it's a complete other thing. This electric vehicles, yes. And people have really to be convinced to change also the automotive industry. It will be a long process to transform the industry because we take it serious, the question of working places and the question of complete other model of business cases with the EVs. It's a big communication task also. Sure. We try to communicate that the total cost of ownership of an EV may be the same or even better in comparison to gasoline or diesel machine.
Sure.
But it will be a process, and other in difference to China, for instance, our method isn't to prescribe or to force more to convince. And here I can say important is the good example. We began with a lot of showcases and model regions to Germany, and we, as a ministry, we want to give a good example. Our fleet is already 75% electric, and so we are very happy that the German embassy takes the challenge and will form their fleet this year in 100% electric. So the good example works also.
Well, you know, in Washington, which is one of those blue places. It's a coastal city. We have a lot of electric vehicles, relatively good penetration of electric vehicles in this metropolitan area. And the same is true in New York and Boston and Philadelphia and the western cities as well. What I'm getting at here is that up to this point in time, electric vehicles are seen largely as a bit of a luxury purchase, if you will. Probably because of their cost, but also because they have a certain image associated with them. And I'm wondering if anybody here on the panel has anything to tell us about whether or not that's exactly the same perception in Europe, or whether it's different. And if it's different, I think we'd like to know why it's different, because this could be a learning experience for us here in the States.
As far as we can see it, you're basically currently seeing kind of early adopters who want to make a statement. And this is what you're currently seeing in the market. I don't know whether it's completely different in Europe. Since I'm also German, I would perhaps assume that, yeah, it may be a little bit more of an environmental statement as well in Germany. So here it's more like showing that you are able to afford it, this new technology, that you want to showcase that. In Germany, it's perhaps a little bit more like I'm environmentally conscious and I would like to spend a little bit of more money for that. But in our opinion, especially for Volkswagen, it's pretty clear this is only a very low percentage of all the customers you basically could address. So if you really want to popularize electromobility, you have to offer something different. You cannot offer kind of luxury, at least as our brand. You have to go really on a broader scale. And broader scale, in our opinion, clearly has to be a kind of alternative to a ICE-powered car or to a kind of plug-in hybrid vehicle whatsoever. And you have, at the end of the day, in our opinion, the customer is going to decide whether this car offers more opportunities for him like a traditional vehicle. And until we are not going to be at this place, I personally, I'm not really convinced that we will see this shift. You can see early adopters, you can see people who want to show that, you can see people who can afford that. But if you go into mass transportation in order to bring people from A to B, you're in a different business.
Sure.
Maybe just to add
Please.
on that, when you said, like luxury vehicles and electric vehicles, I think very often what you see in the industry is that innovations are coming through premium brands or luxury brands. And innovations due to the reason that, it's probably because of costs to start with. And then you'll see more and more market penetration of that innovation in all the other brands. So usually we have the premium brands that come up with these kind of innovations, especially in electromobility when we're talking about very expensive high voltage batteries that we need to fit in cars. So it's true. I mean, for BMW, I think in the electric car segment in Europe, we have a 21% market share. 21%. That's in the overall market, we only have maybe 6-7%.
Forgive me, BMW has a 21% market share of...
In the electric car segment.
In Europe?
In Europe.
Okay.
I think in the US it might be around, or worldwide, and also in the US it's about 11%. But on the overall market, we're only about 2% worldwide. So we have a much higher percentage in exactly the electric cars. But that doesn't mean that, of course, it's not going to go through all the brands. I think when this revolution really will pick up pace, it will go through, and that's my belief, through all the brands.
Cool. Bill, anything to add?
Just, we have to have the frank discussion on electric vehicles. I've been a proponent for over 35 years, but I'm a realist. I keep my feet on the ground. And it's the customer. It's giving that customer the added value. Mercedes-Benz Mercedes-Benz has over 50 models. And by 2022, in all 50 models or more, we're going to have a plug-in option. So the products coming out there, and we're not the only ones, all manufacturers are going to have electric vehicle products in the very near future. The concern I have is what added value is there to the customer. The reason, let's face it, the real reason is sustainability, is for reducing global warming emissions. That is the main reason. Customers are very happy with what they drive today. So it's going to have to be government policy that drives it, either through incentives, HOV lanes, as they do in California, or my big thing now is autonomous vehicles. Make sure you incentivize autonomous vehicles to be electric vehicles. because that's going to start in the urban areas. You get people exposed to the technology by being driven in something very futuristic, and the cost of autonomous vehicles will go crashing down, because what's the cost of a taxi cab right now, which is, to me, is an autonomous vehicle. I got in one today, and I said, car, go to the convention center, cost me $20, and I worked in the back seat, but I paid a driver. In the future, the driver would be gone, insurance would be way down. That's 90% of the cost. So instead of $20, it'd be $2 to come here. $2. So imagine everybody will start using it instead of mass transit. And if you incentivize it to be electric vehicles, those extra vehicles driven, or the extra miles driven, not only be very expensive, but it'd be zero emission. And you could use we have the smart car over there. Those are the kind of vehicles I envision. It'll start out, we don't need the 500-mile range. It should start in the urban areas. That's where the criteria pollutant emissions still, the problems are. And that's where you get people exposed to the technology, get the excitement going, drive the cost down, so then we can spread to the rest of the markets out in Texas and the rural areas.
Matthew.
Yeah, I just would like to add another thing, and that makes the equation a little bit more interesting. Basically, in the moment, we as a Volkswagen, we estimate you cannot get below, let's say, 92 gram per kilometer in terms of CO2 emission with an ICE engine. And if you look at the regulations, and basically it's the same in the US or Europe or China, it's calculated a little bit differently, but in the moment we are all heading in the same direction. We will see an interesting situation. The automotive industry, and you're right, it doesn't matter whether it's luxury or non-luxury, whether it's volume or non-volume. We have to achieve our CO2 targets. Germany, otherwise, we have to pay 95 euros per gram per car. This is going to be really expensive if you miss your targets. So we as a manufacturer, we have to offer cars or vehicles, electric vehicles, that make those vehicles desirable and make those cars kind of affordable. Otherwise, we will come to the situation that we will not be able anymore to hit our CO2 targets. And this is a huge challenge for us, because in our opinion, this is back to Volkswagen. Perhaps we have a little bit more pressure to achieve that, because unfortunately customers do not want to pay as much for Volkswagen as for BMW or Mercedes. We have to really find a way to make those cars so attractive that people are paying the price, because the customer still can decide. And this is a huge challenge for us. And of course, subsidies might help, but only, in my opinion, until a certain threshold. Otherwise, you get into volume numbers where perhaps even the federal government might run out of money. So this is another big challenge, and this is another push to electrification of industry of powertrains.
Yep, agreed. Charlie, did you?
So, well, we started with policy here, and from a lower level standpoint, not necessarily federal, but we've seen over the years with charging station incentives, that's also part of this equation for the consumer. And we've seen some very good state and local incentives for customers. And we also have seen some very complicated ones. And it's amazing. That's a big part of the puzzle, too, to get the consumer interested in the electric vehicle when they know that they can get a charge station at home and at a very, very reasonable price, or in some cases at no cost. We've had some utility programs where the consumer gets everything paid for by the utility, and of course there's a benefit. Some of these programs are structured in a way it's a benefit to the utility company too, so it's a win-win. We've also had some incentives. I can tell you a story about a customer who had a $500 coupon for a charging station, and we consult with the customers on the phone. Well, this customer, we had a charge station that was less than $500. With tax and shipping, it was $520. They didn't want the incentive. They decided not to buy the charge station because they didn't want to pay $20. So,
well, you know, I want to get back to that mentality, if not that specific case,
right,
because I think it is illustrative. But while we got you talking, talk about standards for charging. You know, this is something that comes up internally in my organization, which is, you know, whether or not we need to, for our clients, explore the different charging standards and whether or not they represent an obstacle to uptake. Do you have any sense of the state of standards, if you will, in the U.S. market for charging infrastructure, and whether or not there is a policy need?
Well, luckily, there are only 3 standards in the world, really, the IEC, the SAE, and then GB, which for the auto industry, that I would say that's pretty good. And of course, some of those technologies leverage some of the same componentry, or those 3 different standards leverage some of the same parts and pieces, so that's an advantage for charging stations. And we, in our product line, we have level 2 charge stations, and we also have a low-power DC charge station that's used in dealerships and all. So the only outsider is Tesla, because Tesla has their own standard. Now, they do give the customer adapters so that they can use their vehicle with SAE charge stations or IEC charge stations.
And is there any difference in performance in using that adapter
No.
on a Tesla vehicle?
No.
Could I just add to that
Yeah.
point? Talking about standards, inductive charging is very attractive to our customers. They don't want to get their hands dirty.
Yep.
So,
Could you explain what inductive?
Wireless charging.
wireless charge,
Yeah.
where you just drive a vehicle into your garage and you have
like a coil of some kind.
You have a coil that's, and you can charge without touching anything. And it could be, you could do this in public charging, but we can't implement that right now because the standards are not there yet. We could do it individually, but we can't do it universally. And I feel that we got to show value to the customer. And that's something that we all need to be working on.
Is inductive charging available in Germany?
Well, we're going to launch, most probably also in the US, by the end of the year, wireless charging. It's going to be an option on our 5 Series plug-in hybrid. So you can just drive over that plate just described, and then you just step out of the car, and then the car starts charging. So it's going to be available as an option. And then we will, of course, deploy it to every other plug-in hybrids.
What will it cost?
It would cost a bit more than a wall box. So probably in the US, I think a wall box is around $900 US. So the price are not fixed yet, but just above that, yeah.
But then how do you do the public charging?
I'm talking about, of course, as you
This
said.
is at home. Yeah,
This
so
is, of
that's
course,
just for your vehicle at home.
plug-in hybrids, like the use case is very much you drive at home, you charge overnight, or you drive to work, you charge at work.
Sure.
You can, of course, and that's important as well, and I also agree with you, that you need a public infrastructure as well, because, it's not only that use case, but on plug-in hybrids, and that's the advantage of that technology, is you can just carry on driving when the battery is depleted. And I think that's a very good technology in this time of transition to really ease the way into electromobility, to make people aware, okay, they have concerns on electric range and they have concerns on charging, but it's a good technology to just bring them to electromobility, and it's a step in between. It really marries both worlds, or the best of both worlds.
Well, we had if you're a fan of electrification or electric cars, then you won't like this story, even though you probably know it. A couple of years ago, we had a incentive program, a state incentive program in Georgia that paid a very attractive rebate to purchasers of electric cars. And for a period of time, Georgia was second only to California in the United States for EV sales, which was quite notable because of, Georgia's not California. They're very different states in many, many ways. Anyway, the incentives went away, and so did the sales. And this happened, it happened in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So let's call it 2 years ago, maybe a little less. So not that long ago. But my question is that are incentives are they still as necessary now as they were 2 years ago? Have we reached any sort of fork in the road that would make that less of a compelling tool?
As far as we see the market, there's no manufacturer here who could sell a battery electric vehicle in the US on a reasonable level in terms of profitability. So this is still a huge challenge. And as soon as you see incentives going away, you see that really in the single markets, you see a decline in sales. I heard that there are first signs now in China, because there are other maybe reasons for people to go for electrical vehicle, where even the 20% reduction we see this year does not lead to a kind of proportional decline in sales. But here in the US, as far as we can see it, there's nobody in the market who can already sell a battery electric vehicle on a reasonable level.
Any dissent from
Outside
that?
I
Tesla.
absolutely agree. I think the positive development of electromobility in countries such as Norway or the Netherlands, or also, as you mentioned, some of the US states, really demonstrate that you need favorably designed conditions, such as buying incentives or even like charging infrastructure. Otherwise, you will not reach a certain market success on electric vehicles. There isn't any not incentive-based electromobility market in the world with a penetration margin or penetration share larger than 1%.
Yes.
So basically, there is no or only a very small natural demand for electric vehicles at current prices, at current conditions.
Yep.
So what we need is incentives, really, at the moment, until we reach that inflection point where the price of the high-voltage battery and the price of electric vehicles drop to that level of an internal combustion engine. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there will be no stopping the electric vehicle. But we're not there yet, so we need incentives.
And there's a special, just to add a special feature, in Europe or Germany, we have the benefit that it's a diesel-oriented market, and diesel emission regulations are tougher. So we see those two lines you're just indicating may cross in 2023, 2025. It depends a little bit what you're convinced of. So as soon as you see these two cost lines crossing, yes, we will see a natural demand for electrification. Here in the US, you have a different story because the ICE powertrains are cost-wise way lower than in Europe. And so those vehicles will be cheaper for a long time, offering the same basic mobility features as a petrol electric vehicle. So it's the most challenging environment from our perspective here in the US, more than Europe or China.
And just, if I could just add one last point on that. The Georgia incentive was $5,000. That was in addition to the federal incentive for $7,500. That's $12,500 of incentives. The federal incentives, unfortunately, survived the tax package. We thought they were going to be gone. Yes. And shocked that they stayed in there. But thank goodness they did. There's a cap, too, in that 200,000 vehicles, and then that goes away. Right. So that is of concern.
All right, so we've got some predictability or certainty, if you will, about federal incentives in the states, and nobody sitting on this stage needs to be overly worried about that because none of you are that close to the threshold. I mean, if we had a Tesla guy here, I guess it might be a little bit of a different story because Tesla has a much higher sales level.
GM.
Mm-hmm. And GM's coming up on them. Yeah, certainly GM would be included, but they're not here either. Right. So we won't talk about them. But I do want to hear about the possibility, either case studies and other kinds of incentives, or if not case studies, then what would help? It's sort of a wish list. I understand that. We know that there are political realities when it comes in any discussion of incentives. But we have this federal incentive. Some states have incentives. In the U.S., are there any other kinds of incentives? And I'm not talking necessarily about cash, direct cash. For example, to get back again to something that Mr. Atkinson referred to, taking the other extreme of China. In China, you can't buy a car, at least in certain Chinese cities. You cannot buy a car unless you have a permit to buy the car. And you cannot get the permit to buy the car unless you agree to buy an electric car. Now, this is another extreme, but is there anything that, in anybody's view here, would be acceptable in the political environment of Western Europe or the U.S.?
Can I just point out, you bring up China, which is a real good case study. China has a problem of air pollution, criteria pollutants. Yeah. So they are doing it, they like to say that they're doing it because of global warming and reduction of CO2, but they're not. They want zero emission vehicles there because they have no tailpipe emissions, and that's going to help the urban air, and people are suffering. They have health problems when you have pollution of that magnitude. So they're going to save money by reducing air pollutions. The government has great incentive because when air pollution goes away, like it has in Los Angeles, because of tough regulations on criteria pollutants, the people see it. And if they associate that with electric vehicles, then they may continue it on for the next tier where the rest of the world is at, use electric vehicles for the reduction of CO2. But it's much tougher for governments to get customers' heads around just reduction of CO2 because you can't see it.
Nope.
Can't see it.
I like to disagree partly,
Okay.
if I may.
You're BMW,
We like
you're
that.
allowed.
Because I lived 5 years in Beijing, and according to a study from Beijing University, the air pollution, which is true, it's a massive problem. Here I agree, absolutely. But it's only caused by 3% due to passenger cars. So passenger cars cause only 3% of that air pollution, 7% about like the heavy-duty trucks, and the rest is from really industry. Most of it comes from coal production, so electricity from coal production, and that's what causes the massive air pollution. So by just saying, we're going to go from the internal combustion engine to electric mobility, that's going to solve the air pollution in China. That's not going to work unless you actually reduce and go from coal to maybe nuclear power stations. But yeah, they have, of course, a very strong program, that absolutely agree, to incentivize and to promote electric mobility because they want to become independent from oil. They don't have much oil production, and here it's more political or economical reasons for it. Whatever reasons, there is, of course, a very strong incentive here for electric vehicles in China.
Okay. So is there any page in the China playbook, and this is jargon, so is there anything that the Chinese are doing that we could do or consider doing in the US or the EU that would be in addition to cash incentives to somehow motivate uptake?
Well, I think BMW Group really supports government initiatives on, as you mentioned, financial customer incentives, but also the charging infrastructure and consumer awareness. And I think, Ms. Warren, you actually mentioned that. There is still not enough consumer awareness, even though state of California accounts for half of US sales on battery electric vehicle and plug-in hybrids. We find that there's still quite a low consumer awareness. It falls below expectation on electromobility. I think here the government, maybe through campaigns, can really educate also the public and take some concerns, some fears away from the public. And also, of course, charging infrastructure is here, plays a key role, a vital role, to have just the availability to charge.
And if I could politely disagree with what you just said. Of course. Going back to China, you're right about coal, they're reducing the emissions in coal, but our car sales, all of our car sales, in the United States, we sold approximately 7 million vehicles in all of the U.S. China, about 10 years ago, was half that amount. Now, they're twice that amount.
It's 17 to 24.
I'm sorry?
17 million to 24 million.
And so it's expanding, it's exploding. And so to get their arms around, even though it's a smaller percentage, it's an exploding percentage of emissions that's there. So what do they have to do? They have to get in front of it for government policy to make sure that it is an increasing portion of their emissions. So they must get electric mobility out there into the marketplace.
But if I could,
But there's nothing we could do here that China's doing. I don't think so.
Okay.
what we are currently seeing in China is not kind of a lot of great ideas. What we are seeing that the pressure on the automotive manufacturers is getting bigger. So China basically is going away from incentivizing customers to buy a battery electric vehicle to kind of force the industry, and this is going to start in 2019, to sell a certain proportion of their volume as battery electric vehicles. So this is another pressure coming into the industry, and this is a huge challenge. So I personally do not see any great, perfect ideas how we can motivate customers. We as the industry see ourselves in an even bigger pressure or under bigger pressure to sell the right volumes. And this is, in my opinion, going to be a very interesting game in the future.
Indeed. The charging, can you speak at all about charging in China?
Well,
I mean, in terms of, well, Bosch's position, but also the overall.
Well, we do derive a little bit of a benefit from in the charging space because of the volumes that are being done in China. And again, as I mentioned before, even though there's some difference in the technologies, there are components in the charging stations that are shared. And some of our products are made in China and some are made in the USA. So we do, as the market grows in that country, there is a side benefit in volume.
Mm-hmm. Well, volume's good,
right,
because we're all talking about scale as a necessary ingredient to get this thing over the finish, or not over the finish line, to make this thing work. And nobody has scale yet, but it increasingly is looking like if the scale maybe is going to be in China. I mean, it kind of looks that way. Does anybody disagree?
No, in our opinion, it's China. So for Volkswagen Group in total, in our opinion, China is going to be the lead market.
Okay, so then let's segue into policy, a specific aspect of policy, trade policy. The president of the U.S. Is on record saying that he wants tariffs, and yesterday he actually declared some tariffs on solar technology, imported from all countries, but it was really aimed at China because China is where more than 70% of solar hardware comes from. So if scale is going to be achieved in China, then it suggests that might be a robust export market. China might have a robust export market for electrified transportation technology. Do you think that the tendencies, the nationalist tendencies or the protectionist tendencies of the current administration are going to play a positive role from your respective points of view in the U.S. market, or a negative role? In other words, is it good that he's holding his hand up to China and saying, you're not going to have free access to this country? Is that a good thing for your plans in this market?
Well, I think we're not really in favor of tariffs. We have a huge headache with Brexit in Europe, where if every time a component or even a finished product crosses the border, we have to pay tax. So I'm in favor for really free tariffs. But in terms of markets and market dominance, I think all three markets are extremely important. China will have the higher volumes, for sure, but Europe and US is as important, and we would like to be the number one in all of these three markets. And today, at least, we have sold more i3s and i8s in the US than in any other market. So for us, the US is still very much an important market also for electromobility. Yeah. So I don't see like these effects yet. Yeah. And in terms of technology, where we build them, we manufacture not only cars, but we manufacture also high voltage batteries. And we do that here in Spartanburg in South Carolina. We do that in Germany, and we do that in China. So we have also the manufacturing really of the key components of electromobility in all these three markets.
What I believe all the automotive manufacturers did not start here in the U.S. We learned over time that it's better to put manufacturing in the country that we're going to be selling the vehicles to avoid these kinds of problems.
Yep.
Mercedes-Benz has our manufacturing plant down in Alabama. Mm-hmm. We produce all the SUVs because the SUV market is big here in the U.S. But we export. Every SUV that's sold around the world is made here in the United States. But it's German technology. And that was very important for everybody to realize it's still a German-engineered vehicle. It's not an American vehicle, but it's made here in America. And just recently we announced that we're going to make our two electric vehicles, pure electric vehicles, in our Alabama plant, as well as we're building a battery manufacturing facility. But it's going to be based on our German battery manufacturing technology. Yeah. So you got to go local to avoid any types of tariffs or future disruption of imports. But I'm not going to go there other than that.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm mishearing, is that, look, we can't ignore the American market. It's too important, it's too big, it's got too much money, if you will, whatever. But we're also going to be free marketers, and we're going to operate this as a global business. In other words, we're going to manufacture as close to the market as we can, but we're going to attempt to move our technology around as needed to serve the market. Is that a reasonable summary of what your positions are?
Yeah, just a few words on Volkswagen Group. We have more than 100 plants worldwide. So basically, we are producing cars where we see the customers. That's the one side. And then you have a second layer. What are you going to do in terms of development, in terms of technology? And then you again have certain layers. And of course, for example, we will come to the US starting 2020 as a Volkswagen brand, and Audi is also following with own vehicles. We will come with pure battery electric vehicles starting 2020. Those cars are based on platforms, and those platforms are developed, yes, mostly still in kind of Germany or German environment, but nevertheless, what we have is a network of development centers as well. So what we are doing globally is we are also distributing development work. Base technology, of course not, and for us, so the battery production, in our opinion, of course, has to take place in the market. You're not going to ship a battery powertrain over the ocean for long term, for a mass production. This perhaps doesn't make too much sense. This is also different to combustion engines. But for example, cell production is a different discussion. So if you discuss cell production, this is still a field where the big companies have to discuss whether they want to go into this production on their own, whether they rely on suppliers. And this is, for example, where I personally see China in a very good position, because there's a clear strategy in China to really go into cell production. And maybe that we are going to rely on technology out of China also for the US if you go on the cell level of a car. Platforms and whole vehicles, of course, these are in our group, these are group-related things, and we are distributing that over the world.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, platforms. Let's talk about platforms for a second. We have an interesting array of platforms out here. The BMW representatives are what I call electric-specific platforms. They are, they're the iCars, if you will. Those platforms, to the best of my knowledge, are not made available with internal combustion. Am I right?
Sorry?
The iCars. I mean, I can't buy an i8 with an IC engine, can I?
The i8 has an IC engine.
Oh, it does?
Yes, it's a plug-in hybrid.
Oh, okay.
It's not a fully electric. It's got a 3-cylinder engine, and it's got also, of course, an electric motor. So it's a four-wheel drive, and
so it is a hybrid.
It's a plug-in hybrid.
All right, but you've got the Golf platform back there that is electrified. Is it a hybrid, or is it a?
The Golf is the last witness of our former strategy. We changed it radically kind of 2 years ago, as you know. Yep. Yes, there was a strategy that we tried to, let's say, accommodate all technologies into one platform.
Right.
Now, and we changed it radically, so we're going to have this kind of platform for up to the plug-in hybrids, and then we will have a pure electrical platform for the whole group. And this is the same with Audi, by the way. The two cars are basically on the same platform.
Exactly. And then we've got the Smart over there, which is a Daimler product that, to my eye, looks the same whether it's got IC in it or electricity. So the reason I'm bringing up these things is to ask about kind of a fundamental difference in marketing, if you will, or product positioning. And it is, have your companies decided whether the future is in specific platforms for electricity as opposed to ICE? In other words, are we in a transitional phase now where we see these sort of literally hybrid platforms? And what's the future hold?
Yeah, I'd like to start that discussion. I think with the i3 and i8, yes, you're right. They are like specific vehicle concepts for electrification, even though the one is still a plug-in hybrid. But our strategy is very clear. We're going to shift the strategy. We're going to work on, and we're working on already our 5th generation of electric drivetrain and battery technology. And we're working on really a full scalable modular electrification kit, so that can be used in all model series.
Yeah.
And so allowing really our customers to freely choose between internal combustion engines and electric vehicles. And we're also working on 2 architectures, vehicle architectures. They will be enhanced and flexible, and they can integrate all of these electrification kit modules. And so we'll be fully flexible Basically, our idea is to have all model series representing 3 powertrain systems. The one is, of course, the classic or traditional internal combustion engine. Then we have the plug-in hybrid and the electric, fully electric car. So we'll really have all model series offering all 3 types of drivetrains. And
Well, not to focus exclusively on BMW, but let me be sure I understand and everyone else does. Are you saying that BMW is working on what amounts to a white label drivetrain? Meaning, I can buy it and build my car in my basement using it, or?
We do that for the customers. We're going to assemble the car. But yes, in those terms, we're working in architecture.
Because this is a little hard for a car guy to understand.
We're not going to go specific. One architecture can only do one drivetrain. Basically, all our model series, all our model lineup can integrate 3 different types. And that's going to be the fully electric, the plug-in hybrid for transition now, and internal combustion engine for those who still want it.
Okay.
We are in the fortunate situation that we're selling roughly 10 million cars, some trucks as well. And if you have this kind of scales, you could perhaps distribute it a little bit better. And as you know, the Golf is an example where we put all the powertrains, drivetrains into one platform. Basically, we changed that. We went on the pure electrical vehicles because we think it offers a lot of benefits also for the customer. For example, the floor is could be held completely flat. You have great driving capabilities. It looks, of course, a little bit like a Tesla chassis. This is basically the best thing you could do. So we call it a modular electronical toolkit, and this is spread out all over the whole group. So we think we can achieve enough scale to kind of dedicate one power or one platform only to battery electric vehicles. For other vehicles, indeed, also, by the way, including compressed natural gas, we shouldn't forget that. It's also favorable technology. If you look at short-term carbon dioxide reduction, why not go into this direction? Yes, we are also integrating that into our current platforms.
Now, are you talking, forgive me if I'm going in the wrong direction here, but is this Cedric you're talking about? Is Cedric?
Cedric, it would be one car. The Cedric car was a kind of autonomous driving vehicle. So it was not to demonstrate like the electronic platform. It was more to demonstrate an autonomous driving car.
It was a demonstrator.
Yeah. We have this ID Cross, all those vehicles. That were showcased at the auto shows. They are all based on the new platform, our electrical one. Cedric, by the way, of course, would be the same platform.
Okay, so Cedric probably won't make it to market as a Cedric. I mean, in other words, that's like a code name or
this is going to take another several, let's say, optimization circles until you come up with a final vehicle.
All right, well, let's talk for a moment about joint venture.
Mercedes-Benz.
Say again?
Mercedes-Benz, let me give you our perspective here. We have something that we came up with, it's called EQ. That's going to be our electric drive. For the most part, because of cost, we will be using existing platforms or future platforms that will use the internal combustion engine. But we do have, and the future ultimately will be, development of an pure electric vehicle from ground up. And we will introduce our first EQ pure electric ground up vehicle in 2021.
And you mean
so 2 years. It was designed as an electric vehicle and will only be an electric vehicle. Because then you can optimize, and you have to surprise customers like Tesla does. You open up the hood, like the old Volkswagen,
right?
And it's empty. There's no engine, and it's those kind of conveniences that you really have to get through. But when you design from the ground up, there's so many other efficiencies that you can do with electric drivetrain that you can get with the internal combustion engine. So that's ultimately the future. But into the meantime, to keep costs down, it'll be sharing platforms.
Okay, makes sense. So how about the future of internal combustion? Is it going away?
No. And as far as if I now reflect a little bit our planning numbers, and perhaps the colleagues could support that, there's not only a Chinese region, a European region, and an American region. Even if you assume a kind of, let's say, volume share of 20-30%, you still have 70% of combustion engine in the markets. And if you look at the emerging markets, perhaps even more. And what we see is that we do not that we won't have any additional volume increases in combustion engines. So you won't see more combustion engines. It would kind of be a flat volume.
So what that
forward.
suggests is that the developing world is not going to be a big IC market. It's going to be an electrified market. I mean, I'm talking about Southeast Asia and India. Right?
Sooner or later, perhaps as well, but in the moment, it's difficult. If
Any
you talk
other-
about infrastructure charging, for example.
Okay, so IC lives on for a long time, but doesn't grow.
This is our projection. We do not see big growth in this in ICEs, but it's not like that we are planning that this will go away forever globally in 2030 or something. There's nothing inside from our perspective.
Well, as a representative of a company who's happy to serve both technologies, what do you think? And I guess, I mean, in Bosch's business, your internal combustion business must be an order of magnitude larger than your charging business, or for that matter, any electric vehicle component.
Yeah, I mean, that's our core business, is supplying components to all the auto companies in the world. And Robert Bosch invented the spark plug, I think that was in that original Daimler vehicle too, that was launched in the 1800s. So, but we're in this to support our customers who are the car companies, and our organization has been doing this for 100 years, where we're in the after sales business. When they sell the car, we make sure the dealership has the tools and equipment they need to fix that car, to maintain their customer service, and that's why, to us, charging stations fit that model exactly, because when they sell a car, they want to make sure the customer is going to be happy and have a good experience. And charging at home is probably the most important environment initially to the consumer, to make sure they understand that. And as the keynote speaker mentioned, we see the future as charging at home. Even though there's certainly a need for public charging, it's just like your cell phone. I mean, in the days of the batteries not lasting that long in these phones, you might charge more at work, charge at home, wherever you could charge. But I know myself, 95% of what I do is charge at home with my phone. So,
The internal combustion engine vehicle will be around for a very long time. And the reason for that is, as we as developed countries, Germany, US, et cetera, we have public policy, the emissions policies that are driving down our CO2 emissions. But you have third world countries. If you go back to the Paris talks, if you followed that at all, India was saying, hey, all the developed countries had all this opportunity to spew out all these emissions, so you had very inexpensive vehicles and electricity, and now all of a sudden we're starting to develop, and you want us to cap and make everything more expensive for our people. That's not fair. You should give us the same free ride that we had. So in developing countries, such as India, it's going to be around for a long time, I foresee, and other places around the world. Internal combustion's been here for a while.
The interesting question is, when will it really pick up? When is the inflection point there where electromobility really comes and wins over the internal combustion engine? At the moment, the internal combustion engine, that technology is and has been a winner for 100 years because of the high energy density of fuel.
Sure.
But yeah, we also predict that we have in 2025 maybe 20 to 25% electric vehicles, and then 2030 maybe 1/3. So 2/3 will have only internal combustion engines in 2030. That's 12 years from now.
Sure.
So it's not going to be a quick adoption from one day to the another, but it will take some time. Also in this country, I think the average age of vehicles, of cars, passenger cars, is about 11 to 12 years. So it takes some time really for a replacement of the old cars with new cars. So we're going to have also the next 2 decades internal combustion engine also here in the US. So they'll be with us for some decades to come.
All right. By the way, I'd like to ask if anybody in the audience has any questions. I don't know if anybody has any prepared, but we'd like to ask you to post them, to state them yourselves. We have some microphones set up. In the meantime, while we're waiting for that, I want to go back to my panel and talk about trucks, heavy vehicles, over-the-road vehicles, but heavy vehicles. You know, at Bloomberg New Energy Finance, we kind of put trucks in a little separate category because they belong in a separate category, but we believe that the truck over-the-road truck market lends itself to electrification in ways that cars don't. In other words, there are pluses and there may be minuses. And I want to ask, is this, are we on the right track? Are any of you in position to talk about the penetration of electric propulsion in the truck sector and how that might differ from the automobile sector?
I can do that from a Daimler perspective, maybe from the parts perspective. Daimler owns Freightliner Trucks, which is the largest truck manufacturer here in the United States for 18-wheelers, Class 8 trucks. We own Thomas-Built School Buses, which is the largest school bus manufacturer, and we have Sprinter Vans. So we're in the heavy-duty sector, and we're in discussions right now with California because they want to mandate a certain percentage of the heavy-duty trucks be zero-emission, fuel cell or electric. So we are very much involved in this type of discussion, identifying. We fortunately have, as a wholly owned subsidiary, Fuso Trucks. And they just launched an e-Canter. It's a Class 7 truck. It's a delivery, a large delivery truck.
You mean like a UPS truck sort of thing, or bigger?
Larger than that. Larger
box
than that. The platform, they make the cab and the platform, and you can put almost anything on that platform. If you see lawn service trucks that have these larger trucks that they throw all their lawnmowers in the back of, it's that size of truck. And they are selling now the electric version, 100% electric version, and they can't make enough.
Wait, what market are they selling this?
It's all throughout the United States,
okay.
And it's for local transit,
like
delivery,
circuit.
service of lawnmowers, carrying your lawnmowers. It's a very short distance, obviously. The range is about 70 miles on a charge, and they cannot keep up with demand. And California's seeing this, say, well, we see that there is demand, let's mandate that and make sure it continues to grow. Our hesitation comes, we probably can see some of that local delivery market, especially the Sprinter van, make that electric, UPS delivery type vehicles. But the Class 8 is a different nut to crack, and so California's agreed to leave the Class 8 18-wheeler discussion off to the side, because making it all electric, even though Tesla announced it, and they said 500-mile range, we still can't see how they get there.
Nor can we.
And we even ordered one of their trucks, but who knows if it'll ever be delivered.
Well, I mean, we think they can get there, but there won't be any room for cargo.
They're right, because of the weight. They can't carry any weight of the cargo. You can package it, but you can't, it's useless.
We estimated for a Class 8 truck, if you want to have kind of 800-kilometer range, what they usually should have, you need a 40-ton battery. That's currently in the moment. So I think for the Class 8, it doesn't make too much sense. Volkswagen, we have basically 3 different divisions for trucks. This is Scania, it's a Swedish truck company. It's MAN, it's a German truck company. And also we have our own commercial vehicles. If you look in the delivery area, so short haul and the delivery area, I fully agree. This is a huge opportunity because these are the trucks that are driving in the city. And they do not have too much or too high payload. So these are really the truck, and also the range, the necessary range isn't too big. And so German Post already has a kind of vehicle in use. My former university where I studied, they developed that. We are not even car guys who developed this car. We see a big potential there, and what we are going to do is we will electrify our light commercial vehicles pretty soon. This is going to come. In the long haul, I'm convinced we will see more autonomous driving, because autonomous driving in the long haul offers huge opportunities, but this is not battery electric vehicle. Different discussion, perhaps.
The important part there is customer demand is there, and that's what's driving the market. It's very different and very encouraging.
Well, we're looking for market here. I mean, it's pretty clear that's what we're looking for.
And the final note of the Class 8, the 18-wheelers, fuel cells may make more sense than batteries.
Yep. Okay. Nice little tantalizing comment there. Do we have a question from the? Okay, please.
Yes, hi, Demo Leaderwu, Owners Illustrated Magazine. I was at Frankfurt. I have a 2-part question. At the time the Frankfurt show came about, there was mandates from Paris, London, the 2040 mandate, China talking about 2030, Paris talking about 2030. How do you see that affecting your roadmap and how the adoption will be? And also the other part of it is Tesla was able to get 500,000 people to commit to literally an 18-month wait cycle without the credibility of being able to deliver that scale. So it seems like there's something underneath there. Daimler, especially since you had a early investment in Tesla, how do you see what they've tapped into? Because in my viewpoint, they're really like a luxury manufacturer that was able to scale and tap into an alternative branding for those powertrains. Thank you.
All right, so I two parts, which is how realistic is the 2020 outlook?
Yeah, the 2030.
Or excuse me, the 2030, the Paris outlook.
Yeah.
And I mean, not to over summarize, but what's with Tesla, right? I mean, how are they able? How?
$5 million on the Model 3. How do you see that, and what do you see that opportunity?
Okay.
Well, we're not really in favor of regulations that dictate technology. So I think it should be technology neutral, and regulation should focus on, let's say, what they focus today on CO2 and promoting as well with maybe incentives certain technologies or just certain type of technologies, but not really dictate it's now a prohibition on this particular technology would be the combustion engine. I think it should be, the regulation should leave the OEMs and industry to find the best way and the best technology to meet regulations. So I think that's really our position on these very tough, I think, also regulations, 2030, 2040 that we hear today. On Tesla, I think they've done a lot for electromobility, I must say. They really, by being in the press all the time, the press seems to love them, Wall Street seems to love them. They haven't made one penny yet. They're really burning a lot of money in that sense, but they have done a lot for electromobility. It's in everybody's mind when they think about electromobility. So in that sense, yes, there is a growing demand. We know that. But coming back to the statistics, on really how much market penetration do we really see on electric cars, we're not really at these scales yet. But I think everybody here on the panel agree we're going to see more and more vehicles and also coming from the traditional OEMs and the older OEMs, like electric cars. And we are fully set on that, as I said. And I think to make one thing clear, in the future, as of 2021, if somebody goes into a showroom for BMW, you can have a 3 Series and you can choose your drivetrain. It can be fully electric, plug-in, internal combustion. Same with the 5 Series, the same with the 7 Series, the X5. Every vehicle will electrify the Mini as well. And also the Rolls-Royce, for people that can afford one, will also try and electrify these vehicles. So we are really fully set on that road.
Anybody else want to comment on the realism of attaining the Paris Accords?
I only had a comment on Tesla. The Model 3 is going to be the proof point. I mean, if this car is really going to sell on the level some people are predicting, then first I think Tesla will be in the game of the big automotive manufacturers, perhaps even make profit sooner or later. If not, that also will be a very interesting signal for us. So I think, and we already looked, of course, in the Tesla 3 a little bit. It's a great car. It's a very well-engineered car as well. So it's not only that you perhaps would go for a car that is very interesting, has a great reputation. No, it's also a very good vehicle. So for us, it's really also a benchmark. And let's see how the market is going to appreciate this car. And if they're really selling like 200,000 of them yearly, yes, then we are all happy. I think we as Volkswagen will be very happy because basically they are paving the road for us. So I'm really excited what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah, you could also make a case, I guess, that if Tesla is successful in reaching the sales targets, very ambitious sales targets, then they're going to be operating very soon in an open market. They're no longer going to be benefiting from federal subsidies in the U.S. market. So people are going to be making a decision to buy the Model 3 based on what they get for their money, which is sort of the way cars used to get sold. And maybe we'll be getting back to that, at least temporarily.
What I'd like to say about Tesla is that they will be put down in history books as really getting the electric vehicle vision going. As I said, I watch the business news every day, and every day they talk about Tesla. And it's all free advertising. They have no marketing budget. And our executives, when Tesla comes out with something, like they did with the Class 8 truck and they did with the Model S, not only do we listen, we respond. We are very concerned. We're very competitive. The advantage we have is we've got money. And they don't have the types of resources. So I would be concerned about the future sustainability of Tesla, but no question they will be put down in the history books as really getting the electric vehicle market up and going. And I'll attribute another Silicon Valley company, Google, autonomous vehicles. They put the vision out there. We've always been evolving at the technology to get the vehicle to brake by itself, to give us warnings. In the Mercedes-Benz and other vehicles, you can let go of the steering wheel and it will actually drive itself today, but you have to be aware of the kind of, so the technology was evolving, but Google put that endpoint out there, and all of a sudden, all of us jumped to that endpoint too, and now trying to figure the backfill. That's not how car companies traditionally worked. That's how Silicon Valley works.
Yep, that's right. Any other questions on the floor?
And it's a much faster way, by the way, to look at the endpoint, knowing where you're going to go. Much more exciting.
Hello?
Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Dan Welch from the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, another DC-based think tank. My question is about charging. So I work on electric vehicles, and I also use the cell phone metaphor. But I think the difficulty there is that if you rent or you live in a multi-unit dwelling, you might not be able to charge your cell phone in this metaphor. And here in the US, I think about half of people rent, and we're famous for having large open spaces and garages and such, and not everybody can charge their vehicles here. Globally, how are we going to get to the levels of electrification needed to meet Paris Accords or beyond? And will we be able to electrify vehicles for everybody without autonomous technologies to bring the vehicles to them?
So regarding multi-unit housing, there are a lot more challenges in that environment with putting charging station infrastructure in. But there's also a lot of initiatives by different companies to provide the different networks and different features you might need to do that, to create a charging in that environment. Now, our particular group is not focused on that. We're focused more in single-family homes or homes that have garages, or the ability to put a charge station that they on their property, basically. But we do see that as a challenge, and there's many companies that are addressing it.
I mean, turn it back. Have you put forth any policy prescriptions on this? And not to put you on the spot necessarily, but I would be curious about, because I agree it is kind of a unanswered question, to put it nicely. What we're going to do about high density residential, i.e. urban lifestyles, and how we're going to how we're going to serve that market with charging.
I think we're so early right now. We've documented some of the...
It's better to understand.
Yeah.
We've documented some of the barriers and a few of the policy and technology solutions, but it's early enough in the market, as I think you have said, that we're at early adopters and we're trying to get past early adopters. But if you're trying to make the argument that electric vehicles are inexpensive and convenient, then you have to make the charging convenient. And to have residential charging be the primary focus is very difficult for a lot of groups.
Yeah.
So I think maybe in time that passes to autonomous vehicles and it bypasses it. But I know that there are a lot of public charging initiatives, but we're so early we haven't seen what's worked yet.
I would add to the conversation that a couple of years ago I took a look at this for a client, the question of charging in high-density residential environments. And what we found is that to the extent that there's policy initiatives, they tend to be local or regional in nature, very few national policies. And it's been a couple of years, and I don't know if there's been any great change in that, but we homed in on Vancouver, which seemed to have some kind of thoughtful policies in the works, but I've dropped the ball since then. So for what it's worth, Google Vancouver and high density charging. See if you come up with anything.
I've always been a believer that a person should not buy an electric vehicle today unless 99% of their charging will be done at home or at their place of work. That's the type of customer that we want today. Because if you had to depend upon public charging, even those standards are all the same. We can all use the same charging equipment except for Tesla. There's 8 different charging companies that own these stations, and you have to sign up with all 8 of them in order to be assured that when you pull up, you can pay for it. If you can't, if it's the wrong payment card, you can't charge there. It's a challenge for the customers. We've got to figure this out.
Yeah, charging has to be convenient, and payment as well, absolutely. And number one is really to have a charger at home. That's the most important one.
Well, and the one other thing I forgot to mention is workplace, too, becomes more important at that time, too. And that's that we get a lot of questions from people that buy the charge station for home, and then their next thought process is, hey, it'd be great to have one at work. So then they'll contact us and ask for suggestions or whatever. But and there's a lot of challenges with putting workplace charging in. It's just amazing to me how much money like a building manager or a facility will spend to support their employees. But when it comes to workplace charging, all of a sudden it's, why would we spend this money? But there's no question about other things that they put in their parking lot. It's just a given that you're going to have like a bike rack, or you're going to have parking lot lighting, or you're going to have other things that are, let's call it a benefit to the employees. So.
Any other questions? Please.
William Hopper, Automotive Business Report, and also president of the Washington Automotive Press Association. You all spoke earlier about China. Could you talk a little bit more? Do we know a lot what's going on with them, or are we making assumptions? Are they sharing information at all? Are they somebody that we need to be watching?
So I think the question is is there a difference between what we think we know about China and the development of its EV market and what's really happening? Is there any hype there or any smoke and mirrors, or is it really growing as fast as we say it is, and are the number of players, serious players, roughly equal to what we think there is?
Well, I think we have serious numbers there.
Say again? Sorry.
Serious numbers, sales numbers in China on the electric cars.
Yeah.
It's not a hype. I think they're really committed to it. They have regulations, more regulations. As you mentioned, you cannot register your car if you don't have, or chances is that you can't register it if you don't have an electric car. So they're really trying to make electric cars, very attractive compared to combustion engines. That's a fact. And sales are really picking up. You have a lot of players. Of course, the question maybe goes also towards, is every company really serious and in it for the long term? But this I cannot comment on other companies. But from a regulation point of view, maybe you can back me up on this one, but I think we see really serious regulations to try and promote electric cars in China.
Yes, from our point of view, I can underline this. I'm often in China. I have often spoken to Chinese employees and politicians. We remark this. I can underline this really big market and really big effort to shape the regulation and to optimize the regulation to have under the pressure of pollution. It's true, but...
And China just implemented something similar to what California has, is the ZEV mandate, that if we're selling vehicles in China, a certain percentage of those vehicles must be electric vehicles. So they have the push-pull. They're getting customers to buy them because they can get a registration. Otherwise, they have to go into a lottery if they want an internal combustion engine. But you can be guaranteed to get, if you want an electric vehicle, you can get it. You can get it registered. So the customers are desiring the pull, and the push on us is we've got to sell more in increasing amounts. The only problem we had, the pushback from all of us in the auto industry, is they told us what they wanted 6 months ago, and they said we had to, and it started in 2018. 6 months lead time is not quite good enough for us to respond. So unfortunately, they did delay it for another year and a half. I'm not sure still that's.
And specifically, what did they ask for and then delay, just so we can?
It's a certain amount of battery electric vehicles you have to sell out of your volume.
Like
it's a share of your volume, and
So they gave you 6 months to basically hit a quota.
Yeah. It was a tough quota. And what I just would like perhaps to add, I think this is not only air pollution. This is, maybe it's also industrial policy. What you could perhaps see is that the Chinese industry is preparing for this shift of the industry towards electrification, and this offers, I think, huge opportunities. And based on that, we expect that the pressure will become even higher to go in the electrified direction. Unfortunately, the pressure is also on the industry with the CEF regulation that we have to make sure that we sell a certain amount. Otherwise, we have to go for credits, or otherwise we will even lose our homologation or whatsoever of our vehicle. So there are going to be tough consequences if we do not fulfill the requirements, and I'm pretty convinced that this will become reality.
Thank you. Another, please.
Hi, my name is Nicole Williams. I'm with SAE's Digital Committee for the Future of, I'll give you the title one more time. With SAE's Technical Committee for Digital and Shared Mobility, and we're very interested in creating standards for the future of transportation, but specifically, we have a large focus on autonomous vehicles, and I know you guys have touched on it very briefly, and I know that's not quite the focus of this, but we have such a great group on stage. I was wondering if you guys could quickly comment on what you see as the future of autonomous vehicles through each of your companies' lenses.
So what's the future of autonomous vehicle standards, or the future of them actually being available to buy and use or ride with?
Being available to buy and use specifically, but if you have thoughts on standards, that'd be great as well.
Okay. Why don't we frame that in the context of what Mr. Atkinson said? I think 15 years is that what you had said about full level 5 autonomy, not widespread for about 15 years? So what do we think about that? Let's take 15. Is he too late? Is he too early? Or does it feel about right?
It's how you're going to define it, really. But we're going to launch level 3 and level 4 in 2021. So level 3 will be available, and on a large scale, level 4 maybe more on a small fleet, test fleet. But it's how you define it. And I think level 4, okay, it might not be autonomous like level 5 everywhere, but pretty much everywhere. Yeah, so maybe not in all conditions. When there's snowfall, you might not have that, and there's other things. But
just when you want it.
Yeah. So, but on standards, I think we see the standards here really on safety. I think it's really a matter of safety. I think one of the big advantage, of course, next to giving the customer the time back that he has to spend behind the wheel, is really on safety. We know that 94% of fatalities on roads are due to maybe human judgment or error. And so here we see like really standards coming in to protect also from a certain technology where people say, is it really going to be safe? And here, at the moment, we're really observing how these standards or regulations, how they evolve. At the moment, there's policies in place, more guidelines. We have also, I think, not sure what the act is called, but it went through Congress and it's about to go into legislation on autonomous vehicle technology. So it'll be very interesting to observe where we go from there.
All right, well, how's 15 years? How's that?
I would say this, that probably for a fully autonomous vehicle that can go anywhere in the world on its own with full confidence, maybe that's 15 years away. But to have it in a very precise area, such as geofence, Washington, D.C., you know the roads, the government could say, okay, we're going to have road work going here, and you could plug that or communicate that to all the vehicles. You could have autonomous vehicles operating where they should start, in the urban areas where they have the greatest benefit, much sooner than that. We're all going to be coming out with autonomous vehicles over the next years, much sooner than 15 years. And I'd like to think that it will be happening in very specific areas, get everybody comfortable with the technology before we allow them out into the wide open spaces.
Anyone else want to comment on the on the 15-year horizon?
I mean, if you visited, or all the guys who visited the CES in Las Vegas, they perhaps could see what's going on in this area. And if you just look at the speed of the technological development, I agree it could be faster. But technology in the cars is not the only thing. You have a lot of more things around. And I mean, until we see a car without any steering wheels, I don't know. In the moment, we are even discussing whether you find too many customers, real customers, who want a car without a steering wheel.
Yeah.
It may be a taxi or like this Uber, what you described, absolutely, I agree. But do we really all expect that nobody wants to drive a car anymore? That's an interesting question. So one side is technology. The other thing perhaps is going to be, okay, how is the business developing? How is customer demand developing? And I'm not 100% sure whether we all get rid of our steering wheels in the future.
Yeah, I saw a study somewhere that said 80% of the people don't want to get into an autonomous vehicle. They're fearful of it, and I would be too. I can't even get my computer to work.
Please.
Thank you. Knut Pankin, Friedrich Ebert Foundation. I have a question on the transformation and what it means for the workforce. Can you say something on what you expect in terms of those who assemble cars but also maintain them? Do you expect a reduction in the workforce due to electric mobility? And secondly, what does it mean for the skill sets that workers need in the future who build those cars?
Workforce impacts. So electrification and autonomy, put them together and give us an idea of what that's going to mean for the number of people employed in the automotive industry, especially in the manufacturing segment.
Well, yeah, new technology means new skills, right? So we definitely see here a shift, that's for sure. But the shift won't be from one day to another. We already talked about it. In 2030, we still believe we're going to have 2/3 of internal combustion engines. So there will be still the need for technicians and experts on combustion engines also in the near future and even midterm. But yeah, new technology means new skills, that's for sure. And so that means that also people in dealerships have to be ready to repair these vehicles should something go wrong with high voltage batteries. So we're talking about really like people who have enough knowledge on high voltage systems. And this is something that the whole industry has to get ready for. We're working on that at our end. We have a lot of training also exactly on this technology. And on cell battery technology, we have a new technology center, especially for that, to build more on know-how, even at the cell chemistry level, where we're going to invest 200 million euros in Germany to really acquire that know-how really at that level. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. There needs to be a shift in the industry towards those technologies. Yeah.
I'll only say that I'm not able to say what the impact on labor is, but my observation is there is concern, and probably rightfully so. And the example I use is that in the legislation, the autonomous vehicle legislation that's going through the Hill right now, it's over in the Senate. Mm-hmm. The Teamsters and other unions were very successful in leaving heavy-duty trucks out of it because they wanted to make sure their drivers were protected, at least on this first round of autonomous vehicles. So I guess the taxi drivers and Uber and Lyft don't have as much clout over there in the Hill. But we don't need patchwork in states. We do need federal legislation, both in light duty and heavy duty. The labor is going to be that discussion needs to happen.
All right, well, I think we're out of time. But to summarize, I guess what I'd say most briefly is that there's a lot of uncertainty ahead of us. But based on what I've heard here today, I think it's reasonable to say that the German automakers, who have been monolithically at the forefront of things for all these decades, are going to remain at the center of things as we go forward. But they're going to have company. And with that, I'd ask you all to give our panel a hand.